Good morning to everyone. Good morning, Director Suarez. It's good to see you all. I know we have a panel of public witnesses that staff is going to let in shortly. So we only have one panel of public witnesses. We're going to hear from them first. If any of my colleagues join, then obviously they'll have time for their rounds. But we're going to get going on time. And so staff, if you want to give me a countdown, I'm ready when you all are.
We'll begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenya McDuffie. I'm council member for Ward 5 and chair of the council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today's Wednesday, July 13th, 2022. We are convening this roundtable virtually via Zoom. It's also being streamed live at www.kenyamcduffieWard5.com/live. The time is now 12 o'clock p.m. and I'm calling to order this public roundtable. The committee has convened today for this public oversight roundtable on the district sports wagering program. The committee's goal in holding this oversight roundtable is to undertake an in-depth review of the district sports wagering program's performance and explore what, if any, changes should be implemented to improve the current framework and the district's ability to maximize revenue from the novel industry. The District of Columbia legalized sports wagering in January 2019 with the passage of the Sports Wagering Lottery Amendment Act of 2018. A month later, in February 2019, the council voted to enact Bill 23-25, the Sports Wagering Procurement Practices Reform Exemption Act of 2019, which exempted an initial procurement contract entered into in connection with the Sports Wagering Lottery Amendment Act of 2018 from the requirements of the Procurement Practices Reform Act of 2010. This law allowed the Office of the Chief Financial Officer to enter into a contract on behalf of the District of Columbia that covered sports wagering without first bidding it out through a competitive request for proposals process, the district's default standard for entering contracts for services and products. 5 months later, in July 2019 specifically, the Council of the District of Columbia approved a multi-year contract with Intralot Inc. in the amount of $215 million to provide sports wagering and related services for the District of Columbia's Office of Lottery and Gaming. 10 months later, the Office of Lottery and Gaming launched Gambit DC, the district's sole district-wide mobile sports wagering platform. Our sports wagering program is comprised of privately operated sports books at professional sports stadiums and retail locations, and the Office of Lottery and Gaming's district-operated kiosk operations and mobile app, Gambit DC. Since its launch in 2020, DC Sports Wagering Program has experienced repeated operational challenges. These challenges directly contributed to delays in getting retail locations up and running, as well as the inability to generate a robust customer base for the district's mobile app, Gambit DC. Above all, the district has not nearly witnessed the revenue originally forecasted by the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. At the time of enactment, the Office of the Chief Financial Officer projected nearly $92 million in revenue for fiscal years 2019 through 2022. Those initial projections have been reduced on multiple occasions. In its first year of legal sports wagering, the program generated $0 for the district, $0. The second year, the district made $352,000. And last year, the district lost $4 million. When DC Council was originally considering legislation to legalize sports betting, I successfully pushed for language in the law that requires the Office of the District of Columbia Auditor to conduct a study evaluating the performance of the district's sports wagering program to determine the level of district revenue generated by mobile and online gaming compared to other similarly situated jurisdictions, and submit the completed study to the mayor and the council. 2 years after OLG officially launched sports wagering, the Office of the District of Columbia Auditor published a report in response to that language entitled DC Sports Gambling fails to meet expectations, which makes clear that the District of Columbia is not collecting the same level of revenue as other jurisdictions are collecting from sports wagering, particularly from mobile. Gambit DC also appears to be underperforming in comparison to in-person or retail sports wagering operations, such as betting windows or on-site mobile options, which is the opposite trend of any other jurisdiction where statewide mobile is available. The DC auditor reported that the district made less than $500,000 from May 2020 to March 2021. By way of comparison, one Class A operator, an in-person physical sportsbook at the Capital One Arena, generated $1.43 million in tax revenue for the district for the entirety of 2021. For context, the district is entitled to more than 50% of the revenue that comes in from Gambit DC. From Class A or Class B operators, the district receives 10% of the operator's revenue. And yet, the district generated more than 3 times the amount of revenue from private retail operations. And it would seem that not only is the district not realizing revenue, it is in fact losing money on its own sports betting app. OLG fully acknowledged during oversight that Gambit DC generated no revenue in 2021, and in fact, as I mentioned earlier, cost the district $4 million. And on the biggest sports betting day of this year, Super Bowl Sunday, the district's only district-wide mobile app did not work for anyone who has an iPhone, the dominant choice for consumers with respect to mobile phone devices. A day when the district could have generated thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of bets, well over half the mobile users in the district weren't able to place a bet on the Rams to beat the Bengals. From the council's perspective, this can't continue. We cannot continue to scapegoat the pandemic, the federal enclave, and say because we get a greater rate of return on revenue, we should stay the course. Getting a greater share of zero is still zero. Today, we're going to hear testimony from public witnesses and from the director of the district's Office of Lottery and Gaming. My goal, the committee's goal, and I see Ward 7 Councilmember Gray here. Our goal in holding this oversight roundtable is to enhance the performance of the district sports wagering program, grow the revenue, and compete with sports wagering programs in neighboring Maryland and Virginia. And the only way the district can move forward toward that goal, in my opinion, is to have a candid and frank discussion with OLG about sports wagering programs' performance. We all want to make sure that district sports wagering program serves our residents' interests, captures revenue from neighboring states, as well as tourists who are returning to the city once again as we recover from the pandemic. And we also want to make sure that this produces its promise, but heretofore, unrealized revenue. As a reminder, witnesses testifying on their own behalf are going to have 3 minutes to provide oral testimony. Following that testimony, council members are going to have 5 minutes for rounds of questions. All participants should please mute their microphones when they aren't speaking. I'm going to turn to my Ward 7 colleague and member of the committee, Vince Gray. And you know what? I see that Mary Chair, I'm sorry, I didn't see Mary Chair in my screen at first. I'm not sure who was here first. Ward 3 council member Mary Chair, who's also a member of the committee. Who was here first?
Mr. Gray was here first technically because you guys didn't send me a link until later. And
I'm sorry about that.
No, but I accessed a different way, but you couldn't see me.
Okay.
But I'm happy to defer to my.
Okay, so we'll start off with Ward 7 Councilmember Gray, and then we'll turn to Ward 3 Councilmember, member of the committee, Mary Chair. Good morning, and Councilmember Gray, for statement.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to appreciate you for convening today's roundtable on DC sports wagering, which is hugely important, to say the least. That program now consists primarily of privately operated sports books at professional sports stadia and retail locations, and the office of the lottery and gaming's district operated mobile app and other services pursuant to the multi-year $215 million contract with Intralot. While it was initially projected that the lottery program would result in, I think, $9 million in transfers to the district through the end of the fiscal year 2022. The lottery projected that the actual figure for fiscal year 22 is expected to be around $1.8 million. I supported the sports wagering effort with the understanding that 50% of the revenue would go to funding the implementation of My Birth to Three for all DC, and I know Councilmember Che considers that to be an important endeavor as well. And that, again, 50% would go to also additionally implementing the NEAR Act, which you know quite well, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, that did not happen. However, the law currently provides that except for the revenue certified in the approved fiscal year 2020 budget for fiscal years 2020, 2021, and 2022, and 2023, and another $200,000 annually thereafter, which shall be dedicated to the Department of Behavioral Health for prevention and treatment of gambling addiction. All net revenue from sports wagering shall be divided equally between the Early Childhood Development Fund and the Neighborhood Safety and Engagement Fund. For these very worthwhile purposes, sports wagering, of course, being one of the principal ones, it's hugely important to me, Mr. Chairman. And I will look forward to hearing from today's witnesses at the hearing that you've convened, and I'm happy to join with Councilmember Che as well on this. So thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Councilmember Che. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Gray. I'm going to turn next to Ward 3, Councilmember Mary Che.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like many others on the council and elsewhere, I've been very frustrated by the way sports betting has played out here so far. I don't need to rehash all the facts, but the sports betting app was expected to bring in, or is expected now to bring in, just 1.5 million this year. That's 10% of the 20 million that was expected. Last year, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the app actually lost $4 million and had high profile embarrassments like a crash during the Super Bowl, the biggest sports betting event of the year. Now, I hate to say I told you so, but I'm going to. I told you so. I opposed this contract from the beginning. I said back in 2019 that awarding a contract for exclusive control over mobile sports betting was problematic. We were told we needed a sole source contract to hurry up and beat the other jurisdictions and all this other stuff. It was all nonsense. I also raised doubts about the projected revenue under the contract, and look where we are now. We could have gone in the other direction and allowed for competition in this area and then taxed the profits made by competing betting app vendors. But the council was taken in by this idea that this was a special case where a sole source contract had to be made. It's time to admit that that was wrong and to revisit the entire system. There appear to be a number of successful betting apps in other jurisdictions. There's no reason for us to continue pouring taxpayer dollars into this failing operation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Councilmember Che. We're now going to turn to our public witnesses. As I mentioned, we have one panel of public witnesses, and we're going to begin with Mel Floreza. And we've got Akina Harada as well, and John Mandel. So if we staff have all three of the witnesses, we can bring them on and hear from them.
Hello. Are you able to hear me?
Morning.
Good morning.
Are
Good
you
afternoon,
able to
Chairperson.
turn on your video or?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, perfect.
Is
Good
that-
morning to you. You can begin your testimony and you will have 3 minutes. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie and members of the council. My name is Mel Floreza. I'm one of the owners at Tacoma Station Tavern, which is located on 4th Street Northwest in Ward 4. Tacoma Station has served and employed DC residents over 50 years. We also contribute significantly to our local community and the arts community in the region. Additionally, we are one of the only handful of establishments that provide a venue for live jazz and other musical genres. Like many small business and restaurants in DC, the pandemic has most serious effect on our establishment, and for the first time, we were in danger of losing our business. Like many other businesses, we have had to implement creative solutions to keep our employees working and our business open. One of our creative solutions was to install Gambit DC. The installation of Gambit DC Sport betting kiosks have a tremendous positive effect in increasing our customer traffic, our sales, and more importantly, our profits. Further, we have been able to attract new customers as a result. Gambit DC. The installation of the kiosks also did not disrupt our daily operations. DC Lottery provided all the equipment, internet connections, training, maintenance, and even purchased TVs to enhance our business without us having to pay for it. As you may know, restaurants operate on very narrow financial margins, and we not have to been able to install Gambit without the DC Lottery's help. According to our agreement with the DC Lottery, we can earn 5% of the gross profits on every wager placed via the kiosk with no cost to us. In the restaurant business, pre-COVID, making 2 to 3% net profit for small businesses was normal. Post-COVID, businesses like ours continue to struggle, and we need all the tools we can get to keep our employees working and operating, thriving. Prior to installing Gambit DC, we spoke with one of the larger national sports wagering firms, and it was not very clear that our restaurant would not have made the same amount of gross profit we are making now. Chairman McDuffie, as a champion for small business throughout the city, please consider the benefits that businesses like mine receive as a result of Gambit DC's presence. I am concerned that the restrictions of eliminating of Gambit DC and profit it generates would jeopardize my business. In summary, you should know Gambit DC is working for small business and taxpayers in DC because the platform is attracting customers and generating profits. Two, if the sports wagering contract is altered, it could potentially open the door for larger private operators to have citywide access with mobile apps, which would negatively impact the business that currently house the Gambit kiosk like mine. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
And thank you for your testimony this afternoon. We're going to turn next to, let me see, I don't know if I see the witness who's listed as number 2. Oh, yes, I do. Akina Harada, are you with us? If you can turn on your video and unmute yourself, you can begin your testimony. And thank you for joining us. You can begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes. You are muted. Are you able to unmute yourself? I think you did earlier. We can't hear you if you're talking.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie and council members. My name is Akina Harada, and I am the sole owner of Abunai Poge, located at 1920 L Street, Northwest DC in Ward 2, which is a typical business downtown district. As you know, small independent restaurants like myself have suffered significantly during COVID, and we're still recovering from COVID as of now. I'm located right in the middle of a downtown business district where most people still haven't gone back to work. People have gone part-time, but not full-time yet. So it's still not the same since COVID. Before COVID, my sales were dependent on the typical business lunch crowd and foot traffic. And since then, downtown hasn't been the same and back to normal yet. So Gambit has helped my business significantly by attracting new customers, tourists, putting us, as a destination rather than just relying on the typical foot traffic, and literally put us on the map for people to come and check us out, and also check out the kiosks that we have. Every person who has played on the kiosk has bought something from my store and always brought their colleagues or friends and so on. And, I know everyone by name now. I know everyone who comes and everyone that all their friends that come as well. And they do enjoy coming to small retailers like us rather than going to the bigger wagering places because it's more intimate and they like supporting small independent places like us. Even though we're literally in a ghost town, we're still up and running for 7 years now, and Gambit has helped me tremendously, not only during COVID, but as of now, it's still helpful too. And it came just last year at an affordable fee, in my opinion, and we already made it back within months. Before that, when it first started, I did reach out to bigger national sports wagering firms, and I was instantly denied a shot to hold my own book because I was pretty much nobody to them. However, Gambit reached out to me out of nowhere and quickly put me through the process, and they took care of everything at ease and again at an affordable and profitable price, in my opinion. And even though it appears the numbers are not as large compared to the bigger national sports wagering firms, they are still significant enough for us small businesses and retailers to thrive and help us coming out of COVID. And till this day, the numbers are going up since I started just last year. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. And thank you for the opportunity to testify. And let me know if you have any questions.
And thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. We're going to turn to John Mandel, who is next. And then we also have Trupti Patel, who's going to follow up and round out our public witnesses. But John Mandel.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, would the committee mind if, as a trade group, we had 2 additional minutes for this testimony?
We are typically keeping all our witnesses to 3 minutes, but this is a small round. And so I think the benefit of the testimony would be helpful. I also know that there are several folks I want to note who submitted written testimony who do not plan to testify today, but their testimony will be incorporated into the record. And so you can go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chairperson McDuffie, members of the committee, my name is John Mandel. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, and serve as National Public Policy Counsel for the Sports Betting Alliance. SBA is a trade organization comprised of many of the top operators in the mobile sports wagering industry: DraftKings, FanDuel, Bally's, BetMGM, and Fanatics. Together, our members advocate for competitive mobile sports wagering in the U.S. Roughly 3.5 years ago, the DC Council passed a law to legalize sports wagering here in the nation's capital. It was one of the first to legalize sports wagering after the Supreme Court struck down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, paving the way for DC and many other states to legalize, tax, and regulate the activity that we all knew was occurring illegally and unfortunately continues to occur illegally, particularly through offshore sites. As one of the earlier adopters, DC recognized not only the prevalence of the legal market, but the opportunity to generate tax revenue, provide critical consumer protections, but also that it was only a matter of time before Maryland and Virginia legalized it as well. And as a result, the driving force for the district was to get legal and regulated sports wagering up and running as quickly as possible. Today, 35 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico have legalized some form of sports wagering. 26 of those states have legalized mobile sports wagering, including D.C. As a coalition, we're happy to sort of talk about what we consider best practices and our experiences from being under various regulated frameworks. And I think we can sum that up in 2 words that I'll focus on my testimony today, which is mobile and competition. Mobile is overwhelmingly the preferred choice for consumers. And that's because it's safe, convenient, and offers an interactive platform that creates a far more engaging experience for consumers. In most jurisdictions where there is a mobile option, it hovers around 90% of the total amount that is wagered, where you have both a mobile and a retail option. And that was actually the trend before the pandemic. Now half the country has legal mobile sports wagering, States with a competitive market are able to capture revenue, as you mentioned, from tourists and daily commuters who would like to place a wager on their favorite app during a break from work or while eating or dining at one of DC's fantastic bars or restaurants. The second element I want to flag is competition. Just like any other industry where customer satisfaction determines not only the success of the business, but the jurisdiction in which that business is located. It works similarly in the mobile sports wagering market. Operators are incentivized to provide the best products and attract consumers from their competition in both the legal market here in the district and in neighboring states, as well as the illegal market. Equally important, a jurisdiction with a competitive market sees a higher volume of wagering and is able to generate more tax revenue as a result. And that's also in addition to the revenue it generates from license fees and the local business expenditures such as marketing. Now, I want to take a moment to just discuss the surrounding jurisdictions, Maryland and Virginia. Virginia went legalized sports wagering in 2020. It required a minimum of 4 and up to no more than 12 at a single time. They've recently increased that cap to 17, and the state has generated over $33.7 million in tax revenue to date. Of note, a significant number of DC residents are crossing the Potomac River to wager using one of the legal regulated apps in the Commonwealth. Maryland legalized in 2021. Retail is up and running. The law allows for up to 60 mobile licenses. This week, the state released application information and a set of regulations that should put the state on track for launching before the end of the year. And similar to Virginia, we widely expect that residents from Chevy Chase to Bellevue will be crossing the line to wager with one of the apps available in Maryland. And
Mr. Mandel, I actually, my staff informed me that I noticed the 3-minute rounds for everyone for this roundtable, but if you can stick around, I'm not sure about my colleagues, but I would like to ask some questions that I think you're likely to hone in on about other jurisdictions. I think that's one of the things that we've heard a lot about, the challenges that we're facing here in the District of Columbia, and that the auditor's report from Kathy Patterson pointed out comparison wise. So let me go ahead and shift to our last public witness, but to remind council members that we will have 5-minute rounds for our public witnesses who are here today. And I'll also note for the record that we've been joined by at-large council member Christina Henderson. So let me turn to Trupti Patel, who's the final public witness for today's panel, and welcome you and good afternoon. You can begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie. I just want to say thank you to your staff. They really accommodated a very, very last minute request for me to come on. I apologize that I came on so late, but the reason why I'm testifying is I'm an ANC commissioner in ANC 2A, and I represent the historic Foggy Bottom. But the reason why I'm testifying is ANC 2A was the first ANC commission to do a combined settlement agreement with sports wagering and ABRA. And so basically, I kind of went through hell to make sure I crafted an agreement that worked for the operator and that worked for the residents. And I wanted to share for the public record my experiences on that. So number one, there was no guidance at all. I called ABRA about it. I would reach out to Office of Lottery and Gaming, trying to figure out what rights did I, as an ANC commissioner, have to go back to the operator as far as safeguarding the interest of residents and neighbors and other businesses in the neighborhood. The number one thing I kept hearing from residents was that there was a lack of clarity and a lack of transparency in the process. They felt that this process was extremely rushed, that there was not enough time to truly do a deep dive with the residents. They felt, because when I called ABRA about the license, I said, look, we have no problem with the liquor license aspect, but we have several questions about the sports wagering aspect of this bill. And ABRA simply said, if we didn't approve the operator's license, they were in danger of completely losing it. And this operator basically had stated, if we did not approve their license, we could put their business in serious jeopardy. And that's not a fun feeling as an ANC commission or as an ANC commissioner. We were able to get through to a deal. Neither side was really happy because basically the settlement agreement brokered is considered the most strictest and onerous ever created. number one, and my residents are not happy because they felt like we didn't go far enough. And a lot of the things that we were asking for, we would say, you know what, we don't want cages. That seemed to be, the operator agreed, but outsiders were saying, well, you're cheating us out of money. And one of the reasons why I am talking to you about this is a lot of this was rushed. And now you have ANC commissions and commissioners now starting to ask questions about kiosks, cages, what are their rights? Because they're not feeling a sense of clarity from anybody on what to do. And nobody wants to make a mistake on this. So I see that I'm about to run out of time. I am more than glad to address any further questions on this. This is a very, very important topic. And I want to make sure that it's done right moving forward.
Well, Commissioner, I'll tell you, we really appreciate you taking the time to testify and share those experiences. And if you have the opportunity, we would really appreciate it from the committee's perspective if you wanted to submit written testimony, just to capture anything maybe you didn't include in your oral testimony, and just so that we have a comprehensive sense of what you all have experienced and maybe some of the things that we need to ask of the Office of Lottery and Gaming. We also have oversight of ABRA through this committee. This roundtable is not concerning ABRA today, but I heard you reference ABRA, and obviously we know the experience of ANCs throughout the city with some of the challenges with alcoholic beverage licenses. And so we'd love to have you submit written testimony for the record. And you may want to, if you can spend a little bit more time with us, maybe some of my colleagues will have questions for you too. All right, so we have heard from all our public witnesses. We're going to do 5-minute rounds for public witnesses before we move on to our government witness. And I want to circle back with Mr. Mandel. You had started to talk about other jurisdictions. I think you touched on Maryland. You started to talk about Virginia. I wanted to give you a little bit of my time to expound on the difference between the district's program and what folks are seeing and experiencing in the markets in Maryland and Virginia, and frankly, any other markets that you might be familiar with. It's my understanding, I recall, that I think Colorado and Illinois launched around the same time as the district. I know everybody was hit by the pandemic. Nobody was spared consequences from the pandemic. And so if you have some insights into that, I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. And I can start with Virginia, which is up and running. The way the framework works is it establishes a floor of 4 licenses to be issued to mobile sports wagering app operators. Originally, the law had a cap at 12, and it recently increased at this past legislative session to 17. The very interesting part about Virginia's market relating to some of the testimony we heard today was how incredible sort of mobile sports wagering works with sort of traditional lottery products. There was some concern, I know, from some of the witnesses about kiosks. You know, we heard similar concerns in other jurisdictions about sports wagering's impact on traditional lottery products. And what we've seen in both Virginia and in New Jersey and other jurisdictions, and we can provide the data for the record, is the lottery products did better. And that's because it's 2 different products. It caters to 2 different customers, and they complement each other well, so that individuals who are interested in whether it's getting a ticket at a kiosk or going to a bar and purchasing a sports wagering product through there versus doing it from the comforts of their home. We see that they complement each other well, and they help what is, historically a traditional lottery product even do better as a result.
Right. Let me ask you, because I want to make sure I get to Melvin Floreza and Akina Harada as well. I have a couple of questions, but you had testified a little earlier that district-wide mobile sports wagering would help the district generate more revenue in large part because mobile sports wagering tends to be the preferred method for bettors to place wagers. For what I've seen, however, the trend in the district seems to be the opposite, with most wagers placed in person. I saw it firsthand, during the pandemic with folks lines around the corner down at the area around Capital One Arena, for example. Can you speak to that? Why do you think the pattern in DC is different from what's normal?
Yeah, and as you pointed out, Mr. Chair, the audit looks at two other jurisdictions that launched at the same time, Colorado and Illinois. And not only did they see significant revenue figures during the pandemic, but they saw exponential increases during the biggest sports season, which is really the fall for college and NFL football. Whereas in the district, it remained flat. However, as you pointed out, we saw in the midst of a pandemic, individuals lining up to wager in person at the Class A operations at the Capital One Arena, which is operated by William Hill. And that speaks to what consumers are really looking for in sports wagering. It's above even sort of the preference of the mobile. It's in fact a product that has favorable sort of odds. One of the sort of comparisons we saw between Gambit DC and Capital One Arena's William Hill book, as well as compared to books in other places, is the odds were much worse. So as a result, we saw, customers were shopping and basically made a decision that if I'm not going to have as likely as an opportunity to win a wager, I'm going to look for other alternatives, whether that's in person.
Let me jump in just because I'm coming up on the end of my round, and I really want to turn to Melvin Flores and thank the public witnesses for taking the time, as I already have, for providing their testimony, but also for, in this case, providing your written testimony ahead of today's hearing. I know how precious time is for small business owners, and the committee really appreciates your participation. You had stated in your remarks that you spoke with one of the national sports wagering firms prior to installing Gambit DC kiosks at your business, and said that it was very clear that your restaurant would not have made the same amount of gross profit you're making now. I want to give you an opportunity to explain what you meant by that in your testimony.
Well, actually, we did speak to a couple of the bigger corporations, but we really didn't get an answer. And the only one who answered us was Gambit with their percentages, and we went with that because they were so helpful to us, and they offered us everything for the small business to operate. And going back to the lines and everything, the people were lined up outside of our establishment at a time where we wouldn't have done any business on Saturday afternoons and Sunday afternoons. And we wouldn't even open during that time when we had live entertainment. So we were able to capitalize on the people coming in on our off hours.
Okay.
So that brought us business.
Okay. Let me just note the lineup for the members. We've been joined by at-large Councilmember Alyssa Silverman, and so I'm going to turn for a 5-minute round to Councilmember Vince Gray and Councilmember Che, Henderson, and Silverman in that order. So Councilmember Vince Gray for a round.
Chairman? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank the witnesses for coming to testify. In my opening statement, I focused on something that was hugely important to me, and that is how would we be able to generate using sports wagering as a way of generating revenue for early childhood education. We just thought that was an avenue to be able to get more people involved in supporting early childhood education. And no one like to be feel like you've been made a fool of, but I swear that is exactly how I feel at this stage, given where we are. And Mr. Mandel, I would like to hear from you on what your prognosis is for this situation. We had hoped that this would convert into ways in which revenue would be generated for people to be able to support wagering and early childhood education in the same breath almost. So I wonder if you can speak to that. Is that just pie in the sky to think in terms of that being a way of generating dollars for something that we know is hugely important, something I believe is hugely important? And I'd like to hear you speak to, what your sense of it is that, whether one should even, think about this at this point. So go right ahead.
Well, thank you for the question, Council Member. I certainly believe, and I'm absolutely confident that mobile sports wagering could generate a significant amount of revenue in the district in order to fund and provide funding for the important programs you identified in the underlying law. I believe in order to do that, notwithstanding that we have now Virginia live, but Maryland also on the cusp of launching mobile sports wagering, that the best way to do that is to create a product that provide a product that generates the demand in order to provide that revenue. And therefore, if the district were to contemplate a market where there are several mobile sports wagering apps available to consumers, I believe you'll be able to capture the revenue to help fund the programs you've identified, Council Member.
Well, yeah, and I'm waiting to be able to seize the signs that some of that really is going to take place. And what do you think the signs are that will make that happen? I mean, again, I don't want to keep using the same terminology, but no one likes to feel like a fool. I wanted to feel like we were, buying into something that would generate support for something that people wanted to be a part of, and would generate support for early childhood education, something which I believe and others believe is desperately needed, certainly in our city. So what do you think needs to be done to be able to make a go of this in a way that just doesn't exist at this point, it seems to me?
Well, Council Member, I think looking at not only just the surrounding jurisdiction, but really the trend across the country, I think adopting a framework or, modifying the existing framework to add additional sports wagering apps that are available district-wide, we will see a significant increase in the revenue. We will start to keep residents who are in the District of Columbia who are already going to Virginia. We will start to see a lot more activity from tourists who are coming into the district who may not be at a close enough facility where they can place a wager, and frankly want to be able to use the sports wagering app that they have from their own state where it's licensed and regulated. And, as I mentioned earlier, Virginia has already generated about $33.7 million in revenue as a result of the framework. And importantly enough, their lottery offerings also saw an increase as a result. So if the district were to explore opportunities for additional participants in the mobile sports wagering market, I am confident the district will see millions more generated as opposed to the figures we've seen and that the chair has discussed earlier.
Well, I'm about out of town, Mr. Mandel. I really want to believe that this is a way of being able to give people something to do that they want to do, and to support an endeavor that many of us believe to be hugely important. And you don't want to be made a fool of in the process of doing that. So is there something, and I'll make this very quick, so my time is about up, but
we'll do another round if we need to, Mr. Gray. We'll do another round if
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I want to turn next to Councilmember Che.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the witnesses. And I do want to ask Mr. Mandel a couple of things. First of all, does anybody else that you know of have a setup like ours with our sole source contract and all the rest of it?
Council member, there are other jurisdictions with a sole operation. That is certainly less of the norm than a market that provides other entries into. I'm not aware of any other jurisdiction that did not place it out for a competitive bid. I can certainly follow up to confirm that. But certainly this is a unique sort of framework in comparison to the trend across the country.
Thank you for that. You know, and in response to something another member just said about being made a fool of, the flaws in what we did were in front of us at the time. I know I prepared a lengthy memorandum about it. And so it wasn't as if we were really fooled. We were just happy to go along with some of the, you know, claims of the CFO and others. And it struck me that it was wired, you know, for a single entity. And it was a mistake, and it was a big mistake. Following up on that, and apropos of what Councilmember Gray asked you, if you were to fix our system, what would you do? Should we throw it all out? Should we terminate our contract with Intralot and go the way of other jurisdictions and have a system that we have examples of that operate very, very effectively and very lucratively? So I'm just asking for your opinion. What should we do with this mess that we've created?
Well, council member, there are a couple of options for what the district could do. And recognizing that a number of witnesses who have talked about the value in having the kiosk, what I would say is that there would be a way for the district to open up the mobile sports wagering component to it, to allow for the kiosks and other Gambit DC regulated products to continue, DC operated, excuse me, products to continue, while also allowing consumers who prefer to wager on mobile sports wagering apps that are operated by operators who operate sports wagering apps across the country. So there is a way that it could be done that way. Obviously, I'd be happy to work and we can provide language and look at a couple of different options, but there's certainly ways of doing it to complement sort of existing frameworks and make improvements that will ensure that the District of Columbia is going to realize millions more in revenue with a competitive mobile sports wagering market.
Mm-hmm. And that would allow us to save what's good, however tiny it may be, what's good about our operations, but yet to be able to enter into this arena with the same benefits that other jurisdictions have seen. So thanks very much. And thanks for being able, or being willing rather, to offer us your ideas about how that might be crafted. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Che. Let me turn next to at-large Councilmember Christina Henderson, and good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie, and good afternoon to the public witnesses. Thank you so much for being here today. I wasn't on the council when sports wagering was considered originally, but have been interested in sort of what I would say is the aftermath of what took place last council period, and having conversations, with the director of the lottery around what has happened or not in terms of what was promised and what has come to fruition. And then, of course, the embarrassing thing happened, I think it was over Super Bowl weekend, where biggest betting day of the year, and our app did not work. And so I want to ask Mr. Mandel, thanks so much for being here today. And a follow-up to Councilmember Che's questions. Would you say that most of the troubles is grounded in the fact that we only have one contractor? And, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, Councilmember, appreciate the question. You know, I believe certainly where the district had one operator at the time of the event, and there was obviously a mishap that didn't allow customers on the iOS app on the iPhone to be able to use, is an example of why having one operator in the market can be a challenge for a jurisdiction that is trying to generate revenue, and also for consumers who are frustrated with the experience. We also believe that the value in having other market entrants also improves the members of our coalition. It incentivizes them to create a better product. It incentivizes them to create a product that is more competitive and therefore offers consumers an opportunity to wager where the odds aren't stacked so high against them. And above all, I think, you know, as we discussed, about half the country now has mobile options. And therefore, how do we make sure in the district we're able to capture revenue from, whether it's a tourist from Wyoming, which has a competitive mobile sports wagering market, to a commuter from Virginia, and allowing them where they have an app that's licensed in those states, be able to turn on and make that wager in the District of Columbia, as opposed to them leaving the state or not making any wagers during that period. That's where I think the competitive market is most beneficial.
Let me ask you another question just in terms of the market. Do other states have the similar rules that we have around physical locations and sort of, I won't call it geofencing, but sort of like the radius around a specific facility being able to participate in the market? Right.
And you're referencing the 2-block moratorium, I guess
Yes.
is the way we describe it, around the Class A facilities. I have to double check if there are any. It is certainly very, very uncommon. But there are, I believe, other jurisdictions, and I will provide that information. There might be one or two others that do provide it around professional stadium facilities. As a matter of fact, in Maryland, they also put in moratoriums around, I believe, the stadiums there as well.
Okay. And Commissioner Patel, and my apologies to the other public witnesses. I came in a little bit late, so these are the two testimonies that I did hear. But Commissioner Patel, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ANC's issue wasn't necessarily with the establishment. It was the fact that they couldn't specifically comment on the sports betting piece of the business. Is that correct?
Yes. So a lot of the issues were kind of, the residents were asking, we asked for geofencing. The establishment is directly in the heart and center of the George Washington University campus. So we had issues about safety protocol, gambling addictions, and it's kind of like you have the business owner who's saying, oh, like, we're not going to become this gambling hall, this gambling brothel. And I have residents who are sitting here saying, this is not what we want to be known for.
Okay. But so for the ANC, though, you can only comment on the alcohol license portion or the general zoning portion, but not the specific transactions that are happening.
No, we were able to comment, but that was where the back and forth was. We had no clarity and guidance. Like, we were sitting there saying, no bets over a certain amount of money. We didn't want cash payouts. Like, we were thinking of things to keep residents safe. We didn't want to be a place where people could, realize people were walking out with big cash payouts. And, we were running into issues where the operator would say, well, we can only control sports wagering in our physical location. We can't do anything online. So, and then I said, well, how will you get patrons out of your establishment? And they were like, because like they're using their internet to place bets. And this is the reason why it was so frustrating, because this was not well thought out with, certain locations. Like, it's kind of like, okay, we have residents who, live around the campus, and, and they were just angry because they just kind of felt like this was done in such a rushed way that they didn't think about, where establishments could be located and how it would impact the integrity of the neighborhood. And so that was like my big challenge, and the reason why I'm testifying today. With all due respect to a lot of what Mr. Mandel was saying, like, I can just tell you, in crafting that settlement agreement, it was a complete nightmare, and it was not well thought out. And everybody was like, oh, these are all good questions that no one bothered to address.
Thank you. Over my time. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. We're going to turn next to Councilmember Silverman for a while.
Great. Good afternoon, Councilmember McDuffie. Good afternoon to everyone. So it is tempting to say I told you so, but I heard that the Ward 3 council member said that already. Plus the fact, the point of having sports gambling is to earn revenue, to pay for things like public education, public safety, housing, and so forth. There were 5 members who voted against this contract, and a few of those members voted against sports gambling from a moral point of view, in that they thought that government shouldn't be in the business of promoting gambling. So I wasn't one of those members. I voted against this contract, as well as the sole sourcing, because I thought it was a bad deal for the district. I thought former CFO DeWitt and former lottery director Bresnahan's projections were irrationally exuberant. I kept trying to sever the sports gambling contract from the lottery contract approval because I was concerned intra-lot performance with the lottery was weak. And that would be a good indicator of how they would perform in sports betting. But look, members voted how they voted, and here's where we're at. We have an embarrassing sports gambling program right now that can't even operate well on Super Bowl Sunday. I think that the numbers show that like February was like, if not a weak month, if not the weakest month in sports gambling. That should be like Christmas in retail for sports gambling. That is the big event. I'm not a football fan, but that's what I hear. People bet on Super Bowl Sunday, and our lottery app failed. But I think there are some things that we can, looking at the current program, and what we have to do is figure out what to do from here. Where do we go from here? And I think there are some data points and some indications of the path forward. I think we can first take a look at sports gambling and say that it looks like the kiosks are outperforming our app. And I think that speaks to whether we should keep this current system that we have. I think it speaks volumes that even in a pandemic, a very contagious pandemic, that people would rather gamble in person in a crowded sports venue than be in the comfort of their home on our DC Lottery app, on our Gambit app. My questions, I have actually a markup, Councilmember McDuffie, at 1 o'clock, so I'm going to end here. I am going to have to turn to my markup, and I'll be back right after for the government witness. But just to preview, I heard, I think, Councilmember Henderson and Councilmember Che. I missed some of Councilmember Gray's remarks, but I think everyone's asking, what do we do? Do we throw this system out? And do we go to an app-based system with DraftKings and the large sports betting concerns? Or is there some way to salvage this system? Those will be my questions for our government witnesses. I want to thank our public witnesses. I know Mr. Mandel was, and I had many, many conversations during the debate over the contract. I think he knows my thoughts pretty well. I want to thank our other public witnesses for testifying, and I will return to the hearing in about 15 minutes. Thank you all so much.
Thank you as well, Councilmember. Before we shift to the government witness, I wanted to ask Commissioner, as well as Mr. Mandel, you both mentioned kiosk cages. I know, Commissioner, you mentioned it in sort of how you all were negotiating the benefits package. And I wanted to get your perspective and experience on what, how that played out in your SM&D, and then also ask Mr. Mandel about kiosk cages as well. Commissioner?
Absolutely. So in the settlement agreement we brokered, we told them that, number one, the settlement agreement that they brokered with the ANC Commission would have to be inherited by the next operator, because there was true concern about it becoming a full-blown gambling hall. So that was the number one thing which the current operator agreed to. He agreed to never put a cage. He said yes. He agreed to lock up his kiosk by a certain time, which we did not restrict him, but he voluntarily did that on his own. We put it in writing. You know, and just a lot of it, you know, from what the operator had said, you know, they were getting phone calls from other legal attorneys, you know, entities like Mr. Mendel's, like, who represent the sports betting world. And we're saying, like, if you put this in writing, you will, like, you know, put like a strangleneck hold on any future sports wagering entities that want to come in. And, you know, I simply had to tell the operator, and I said, do you understand that you are in a residential area? And I said, people are not anti, you know, investment, and we're not anti-business, but I said, we do not want to become like, you know, and literally the language got used. We don't want to become Capital One Arena. We are not looking to have people loitering outside of this new establishment, you know, looking to, you know, recruit people as they're leaving the bar to be like, oh, come over here, let's party here. Like, you know, there was genuine concern, and it was frustrating because, you know, there is a high school, you know, not 2-3 blocks away. We had to sit there and say, how are you going to prevent teenagers from coming in? How are you going to handle if somebody's been gambling / drinking for 3, 4, 5 hours? I mean, what are you going to do if a patron gets angry? I mean, what is your staff? What are these protocols? And these are things that I had to insist upon. And what was really frustrating is that there was no foresight, no forethought from, you know, when this legislation got passed. And that was another thing that angers the community. They felt that this was just further chaos from the legislation that got passed in 2019 with little or no public input. They just felt it was really rushed. And, you know, I'm not, you know, I personally, I don't gamble, so I don't understand like the obsession about sports betting. I'm not sitting here saying I want sports betting to go away, but if you're going to have it, make it work for the city, because right now the residents do not think that this is a good idea in a lot of their areas.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And with I want to turn to Mr. Mandel, same question around kiosk cages.
Well, Mr. Chair, you know, I certainly want to tap in some folks from my team who operate some of the retail sports wagering facilities, both in the District of Columbia and other places. I know that the Office in Lottery Gaming just convened a series of roundtables focused on the privately run sports facilities, sports wagering facilities. I'm not sure if the commissioner or actual operators of the sort of Class B operations or Class A had a chance to provide comments to it, but it sounds as if something that could be sort of discussed through the rulemaking process, and I'm happy to bring some folks from our team to talk about some of the best practices in that area and address some of the public safety concerns that the commissioner raised.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we were having this roundtable now versus later. And I'll ask the director of OLG about what they heard from the process that it just played out with the private roundtables that they had with the operators, or the roundtables that they had with private operators. I think that's a better way to phrase it. But also because we're almost at the 1 year mark of the DC auditor's report that they published pursuant to the law that I really pushed that provision to make sure that the auditor would have some insights into how things were faring. They published that report in September of last year, and rather than wait till September of this year, I think just having this conversation now is appropriate as we enter into the summer, and as we think about the driving force for some of these programs around the country being to generate revenue. It was the same driving force that I think pushed the council to act as quickly as we did. I think with the information that we had, which has proven to be incorrect based on the CFO, the former CFO's pronouncements. But we're also thinking about coming up on the fall sports season, NFL, college football, the need to understand how OLG is thinking about these things. Is there anything with my remaining time, before I turn back to my colleagues really quickly, Mr. Mandel, that the district should be thinking about as we approach the fall sports season and how we are operating our sports wagering program?
Sure. And it's a great question, Mr. Chair. I think one of the sort of beauties about the mobile sports wagering industry is that it really can be molded to fit really sort of the framework that is unique to the circumstances of any jurisdiction. We have an existing system in place now. This adding additional entrants from the mobile space to Gambit's operations, both at the kiosk and at the mobile operations, is doable. It wouldn't be, DC would not be the first jurisdiction to have a regulator in the market. Connecticut is another example, but there are others. So it's possible. And one of the great things is, you've now have some of the rulemaking in place, but we've also seen in other jurisdictions how quickly vetted mobile sports wagering operators in other states are able to launch rather quickly and go through still without undermining an important vetting process based on their experience of doing it in so many other jurisdictions.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you made a similar comment, I think, in response to either Councilmember Gray or Councilmember Che earlier. I think there was a question about, do we get rid of the existing contractor? Do we just scrap the whole process? And in my reading of the law, at least, I don't think you don't have to necessarily, if the city so chooses, right? You might choose to just get rid of the contractor, right? Who knows? But the law doesn't require that the district must get rid of the contractor, but you could open it up to competitive mobile under the current existing law if the city so chose. Is that correct? Is that how you understand it?
That's exactly right. And, I obviously am not as well versed on the underlying contract with Intralot, but from a practical standpoint, it absolutely can be added to just supplement and help the district really generate the revenue without perhaps necessarily undoing aspects of the existing contract in place. Of course, happy to work with the council on that and OLG and bring some of the operators in to discuss the best path forward for the District of Columbia.
So I want to thank all the witnesses who took time out of their day to participate. We really appreciate your input. Commissioner, a special thanks to you for coming on last minute. And again, if you have the opportunity to provide us with some testimony in writing, we'd love for you to do so. I see you raise your hand. If you can make it really brief, I want to make sure that we get to our government witness while I still have a couple of council members with us. Commissioner?
Absolutely. No, I just
Final
wanted to, I just wanted to say, Councilmember McDuffie, ANC 2A will put out an official resolution next week. Our meeting is next week. So it would be codified in that, and more than happy to send even just separate comments from myself. I'd like Mr. Mandel to get in touch with me. You know, I am pretty fair. I don't know how to get in touch with you, but I'm an elected official, so you'll be able to find me, and perhaps maybe we could talk before the ANC meeting, and you're also welcome as a guest.
Well, thank you again, Commissioner. Thank you to all the witnesses who provided testimony this morning. Next, we're going to turn to Mr. Suarez, give him and his team the opportunity to turn on their cameras. I want to thank you all for being here this afternoon as well. Executive Director Suarez, you begin your testimony whenever you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. As Chairman McDuffie mentioned, I am Frank Suarez, the Executive Director of the Office of Lottery and Gaming, and I'm honored to have this opportunity to present testimony on the District of Columbia Sports Wagering Program. Joining me virtually today are my colleagues, Risley Bennett, who is Chief Counsel for OLG, Craig Lindsay, who's our Agency Fiscal Officer, and Peter Alvarado, who's our Director of Regulation and Oversight. Now, OLG's mission is to responsibly maximize revenue generation for the District of Columbia through the sale of innovative lottery and sports wagering products, while providing gaming regulation and oversight that upholds the highest standards of integrity and public trust. Now, our mission of responsibly maximizing revenue is no different for sports wagering than it is for traditional lottery. And as such, maintaining OLG as a sole operator of mobile and online sports wagering across the district is the option that best maximizes revenue. Private sports wagering operators have had almost 1.8 million wagers placed year to date in fiscal year 2022, and approximately $128.9 million in handle. Now, this is an increase in handle of $20.5 million or 18.9%. However, tax revenue from private operators has decreased significantly year to date by about $582,000, totaling approximately $990,000 year to date, which is a decline of 37% compared to the same period in fiscal year 2021. Now, while tax revenue has declined, the number of private operators in the district has actually increased. In October, the first Class B licensee, Grand Central, began operations in Adams Morgan. And most recently, we were very excited that FanDuel opened its retail sportsbook at Audi Field on June 30th, 2022. In contrast to private operators, Gambit DC, which as you all know is the OLG operated sportsbook, is experiencing strong growth across the board with significant handle, wager, and transfer growth in fiscal year 2022 thus far. Gambit DC has had almost 1.5 million wagers placed, achieving about $45.6 million in handle, which is an increase of 49% in wagers and 31% in handle. In fact, Gambit DC wagers placed in both May and June 2022 have surpassed all wagers placed by private operators in the district. This strong growth has been driven by OLG's ongoing implementation of product enhancements. This includes increasing the Gambit DC payout to 90%, which better aligns with the competitive payouts offered in Maryland and Virginia. And since the change to the 90% payout in February 2022, handle has been up 39.6% versus the same period last year. Gambit DC has also rapidly expanded its retail locations this fiscal year. Gambit DC now has a total of 50 licensed retailers. In fact, retail wagers accounted for 37.9% of wagers and 25.6% of handle this past June, and that continues to grow. Gambit DC retailers, which are small local businesses, have earned a total of about $391,000 in commissions since the launch of our retail network in July of 2021. Our continued enhancements to the player experience have also contributed to growth, such as streamlining registration and increasing the variety of events and leagues. And this fall, we will launch a significantly enhanced user experience that is more in line with what players experience when wagering with private operators. Now, building a completely new sportsbook from the ground up required upfront investment that included high customer acquisition and marketing costs. In addition, Gambit DC was responsible for the significant expense of regulating privately operated sportsbooks. These investments and regulatory costs resulted in Gambit DC not providing a net transfer to the district in fiscal year 2021. However, most of the startup costs have now been incurred and marketing expenses have normalized. Gambit DC has an estimated year-to-date transfer of approximately $2.2 million to the district's general fund, which is more than double the amount of tax revenue that has been collected from private sports wagering operators in the district year-to-date. Now, this is how the model was intended to work, and it is now functioning as designed, with the district-operated sportsbook contributing a greater share of the profits. The current 38% decline in tax revenue from private operators illustrates how the privately operated sports wagering model is actually the riskier revenue stream for the district. While the Gambit DC model ensures that the district will receive a minimum of 10% of handle before expenses, regardless of the actual payout of the sportsbook, private operators offer no guaranteed tax revenue. By statute, private operators are only required to provide 10% of gross gaming revenue, or GGR, which is handle minus payout. Now, in highly competitive markets like we have here in the district, private operators are offering higher payouts to attract players from competitors, which has led to a much lower GGR and therefore lower tax revenue. Fiscal year 2022 illustrates this risk, with BetMGM not providing any tax revenue in the month of October 2021, and Caesars William Hill, which is the district's largest retail sportsbook, only providing $6,092 in tax revenue to the district in February, which, by the way, was mentioned as the biggest month for sports here. As I've stated, OLG has a mission to maximize revenue, and we're confident that maintaining a district-operated sportsbook as a sole operator best accomplishes that mission. An alternate option that is available per the Sports Wagering and Lottery Amendment Act of 2018 would allow private operators to obtain licenses to operate mobile and online sports wagering across the district in lieu of the current model, which has the district-operated sports wagering as a sole mobile and online sports wagering provider district-wide. Now, under this alternate option, private operators would be taxed at a rate of 20% on GGR for mobile and online wagering. The average payout for private operators in the district in fiscal year 2022 year to date is 92.3%. If you assume that private operators would maintain the same average payout of 92.3% for mobile and online players, and you increase the tax rate on GGR to 20% as allowed by law, private operators will have to actually increase the current fiscal year 22 handle achieved by Gambit DC, which, as I mentioned, was $45.6 million, by more than 300%. To provide the tax revenue equal to the current Gambit DC transfer amount of $2.2 million. So just to be clear, they would have to multiply the $45.6 million that Gambit has done with mobile and online by 300% to get to the same transfer amount. This would be quite a feat, as private operators will not only have to improve their handle growth rate significantly beyond the current rate they have of 18.9%, which, by the way, is a little more than half of Gambit DC's 31% growth rate this year to date. But they will have to compete even more aggressively, as Maryland will soon be offering mobile and online sports wagering, increasing the hurdle of achieving an already unsurmountable 300% or more increase. Not only would changing the model to a privately operated mobile and online model be riskier and provide a lower share of sports wagering profits to the district, but it also will increase regulatory costs. As a matter of fact, the district's privately operated sports wagering program has just barely broken even. The district has collected $3.4 million in tax revenue from private operators through June 30th, 2022. Total tax revenue, combined with the $2.1 million that OLG has collected in licensing fees, equals approximately $5.5 million. However, total regulatory costs, which include expenses like payroll for the regulatory team and costs for the licensing system software, equal about $5.4 million since inception. So increasing the number of private operator licenses in the district will result in an increased regulatory scope, particularly as OLG will have to regulate adherence of multiple private operators to geographic restrictions along the district's border and within areas excluded due to the Shipstead-Luce Act and 2 block exclusionary zones provided to Class A licensees. This will assuredly increase costs and further reduce the district's overall sports wagering revenue. Now, much has been speculated about the success of the model in the district, given the extremely high expectations that were set in 2018. One key method for measuring performance is to compare the district to other jurisdictions. However, it is important to note that this is an almost impossible task, as there is no other sports wagering jurisdiction that is truly similar. Since the district has a unique sports wagering model and by far the smallest population of any jurisdiction, the best option is to analyze overall sports wagering revenue on a per capita basis. Per capita comparison is utilized in the gaming industry because it minimizes bias due to population size variances. Now, an analysis of the latest available 6 months from October 2021 through March 31st, 2022 of sports wagering revenue data of the district and of 12 other US jurisdictions that have had mobile and online sports wagering for at least 1 year reflects that the district provided $2.47 per capita of sports wagering revenue during that time. This is more than 50% higher than the $1.63 per capita in tax revenue provided by Virginia, which has benefited from the retreat of the district's commuters during the pandemic and has been lauded as the most successful launch of sports wagering in the region. It's also higher than any of the states mentioned by the previous witness, Mr. Mandel. In addition, when you rank the jurisdictions based on sports wagering revenue per capita, the two best performing jurisdictions by far are New Hampshire and Rhode Island, and they have a sole operator model overseen by the state lottery as well. This further supports the current model in the district with OLG as a sole operator of mobile and online sports wagering and disputes the theory that to be more successful, you need a competitive market that is open to multiple licenses. In contrast, this would indicate that a sole operator model that provides a larger share of profits is the most effective in bringing revenue to the district. Now, these results and upcoming initiatives provide a glimpse of what is possible in the future for sports wagering in the district. We will continue to build on the momentum we have achieved thus far in fiscal year 2022. It will be an exciting time for Gambit DC as we look to make ongoing enhancements, as well as complete a total revamp of the mobile app and website experience this fall that will be more intuitive and user-friendly for players and allow Gambit DC to better compete against private operators in Virginia and Maryland. This increase of our payout percentage cap to 90% has proven to be a game changer for Gambit DC and will continue to drive growth when combined with the revamped user interface and experience. Gambit DC's retail rollout will continue, providing a low barrier to entry for small and local and minority businesses, and will expand to offer over-the-counter sales that will complement the self-serve terminals already in the market and add capacity during heavy traffic periods. A new marketing plan is being finalized for Gambit DC that will better position the brand amongst its competitors in the district, be better targeted at key player segments, and will provide a strong return on investment as we look not to only acquire, but also retain players. Now, I just want to reiterate that the district model is built to succeed in the long run and is now illustrating that with the appropriate time, it will. I'm excited to have had the opportunity to build on the recent success and look forward to the continued responsible growth of gaming revenue for the district. In closing, Chairman McDuffie, I would like to thank you, the council, and the mayor for your continued support of the Office of Lottery and Gaming and for this opportunity today. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Executive Director Suarez, for your testimony. For the benefit of my colleagues' planning purposes, and I know staff of some of my colleagues are listening in case their members return. We're going to do an initial 10-minute round for members, and we'll do another round of second round of 7 minutes. And if there's a third round necessary, we'll go with a 5-minute third round. So if staff could give me 10 minutes for my initial round. Director Suarez, the district launched its sports wagering program just before the pandemic. And during OLG's performance oversight hearing earlier this year, you and I discussed how COVID-19 was not the only factor impacting Gambit's performance. This is also evidenced by the fact that during the pandemic, the private sportsbook at Capital One Arena, as well as mobile sportsbooks in other states, outperformed Gambit, even after adjusting for population. Discuss for me, if you would, what you all believe at OLG contributed to this contrast in performance other than the pandemic?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think there were several variables going on during that time. One, Gambit DC was a completely new brand, new sports book that we had to build from the ground up. When you compare that to other the sports books like a Caesars, William Hill, or a BetMGM. They're established sports books. They have very strong brands. Players know them, and so they tend to really go and go to those and rely on those brands as ones that they know. And so I think, one, we had to build a brand for Gambit, and that took time. A big one, and I will tell you the biggest one I think is our 80% payout. So my understanding, and I wasn't here back when this was launched and started, but my understanding was that there was an assumption that there would be a lot of casual players in the district and that the payouts would be fine at 80%. Well, we learned that that actually wasn't true, that we had a lot of competitive players who actually do look for the best odds. And so they weren't going to Gambit. And the other thing to keep in mind is the jurisdiction is so unique compared to any other. We're only 68 square miles. So when you're shopping around for the best odds, making that drive to Capital One or to BetMGM, it's an easy, short drive. You're not having to sacrifice a lot to do that. And I think that hurt us in the beginning, not having a competitive payout. The other thing that I want to sort of call out is that we also continue to be confusing from a geofencing perspective with all of the exclusionary zones, both the Shipstead-Lusac and the 2-block exclusionary. We have to deal with those, or Gambit DC has to deal with those in a way that no private operators do. And so that also has impacted. To date, we've had about 225,000 transactions that have been declined in those zones.
You mentioned some other jurisdictions, and you referenced to other jurisdictions, and I want to sort of hone in on something because I also referenced earlier the DC audit report from last September.
Yes.
And in your response to the DC auditor report, I recall, you mentioned there was a negative impact to professional sporting events and the number of commuters, tourists to the District of Columbia. This is something that I wanted to have an opportunity to perhaps clear up today. Colorado and Illinois launched at the same time as the district. I brought this up in the public witness questions. That's correct. Is that your recollection? Mrs. Suarez?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, so did those states experience a similar negative impact in sports wagering revenue as a result of the pandemic? I'd love for you to kind of walk us through how the numbers compare between DC, Colorado, Illinois during the audited period.
Yeah. What I will tell you is, again, in those states, they weren't building a sports book from the ground up, so they didn't have to experience that. They had private operators that were used to doing this everywhere else and had brands built. And then also, if you look at Colorado, while they may have outperformed us during that time, we are now outperforming Colorado per capita on tax revenue to the district or to the funds, wherever they.
Let me stop you for just a second, because you said that I know there's a frequent reference to building the brand.
Yes.
At the outset, the motivation as articulated by the then CFO and former Ward 2 council member was to be first to market, maximize revenue. I think everybody on the council agreed that maximizing revenue was important if they believed in gambling at all. Some people had a more opposition to gambling. If the goal was to maximize revenue at the outset and be first to market, how do you reconcile it with the frequent default that I hear from you and I've heard from others that you have to build a brand? Why not just bring in some of the bigger brands then, if the goal was to maximize revenue?
So, Chairman McDuffie, I can't speak to that decision, to be honest with you, back then. That was before me, and that was the decision of the OLG and the OCFO back then.
Would bringing in the bigger brands now help us better maximize revenue? Because
as I spoke earlier, we can only tax those bigger brands at 20% on GGR. That's not going to give us a lot, right? 300% increase is required for compared to what Gambit is doing in handle for them to even match Gambit's transfer, not beat it, match it. I think we really have to understand the true numbers behind all of this, right? I also mentioned how much it costs for us to regulate private operators. We add more private operators, it costs more to regulate them. And like I said, you have heard a lot of the numbers from private operators about the tax revenue But the district, when you net out the cost for regulating them, we've not even hit 200,000 in net profits.
Talk to me about the cost for regulating them. Like what goes into that cost? I'd like to
So that cost is the payroll that we pay for the regulatory staff, and also the licensing software that we use for licensing private operators and tracking and managing that. And
and that's all operated by OLG, or is that operated by the contractor Intralot?
OLG.
Okay.
Because
so,
OLG is a regular, Intralot is not.
Are you in providing us with the information about the revenue from sports wagering? Are you subtracting OLG's cost of regulating?
Yes. Yes. So when you take OLG's cost to regulate and compare that to what we've made in tax revenue and in the license fees, right? So to be fair, we're including what we've gotten in license fees from private operators. We're still only netting out slightly less than $200,000 to the district as a whole from private operators. So if you increase the private operators, that cost goes up.
I got you. I want to let you finish your statement. I don't want
Yeah. The cost goes up. And remember, at a 20% on GGR, they have significant amounts of handle that they have to increase compared to what Gambit has to achieve the same amount of money going to the fund. So
we're talking about revenue here, and I want to go back to the audit and during the audit period, which I believe was May 20th through March of 21.
Right.
Approximately $14 million was wagered with one private operator, William Hill, and $5.5 million with Gambit DC. So if I understand this correctly, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, 72% was either wagered in person at a retail location or on a mobile device within 2 blocks of that location. In other jurisdictions, what percentage of sports wagering is done on a mobile device or at a physical location on-site mobile device?
Well, I think as you heard the public witness, Mr. Mandel, say, I think they believe 90% of transactions are mobile.
Okay.
But I think you have to remember 68 square miles versus New Jersey, Virginia, Tennessee, Colorado.
Okay.
We have a lot. It's much easier to reach a retail location here than it is in any of those other states.
Let me just make sure.
Them.
Got it. And so you mentioned the 90%, and then Mr. Mandel said that. I just want to make sure. So since the audit period back in March of 2021 last year, what's the current breakdown of percentage that is wagered with Gambit DC versus private operators?
Let me see, from a percentage perspective. Let's see, year to date, I know that the handle for private operators is 128.9 million. And Gambit handle is 45.6. So say the percentage, if I add those together, 130 plus 45 is 175. I have to get my calculator out.
All right, if you could get your team just to let us know, I'd love to get an answer to that before the end of the round.
Yeah, and I mean, I can tell you that it's basically 3 times the handle is private operators than it is Gambit.
Okay, and then
but that doesn't translate to revenue.
With my remaining time, I want you to walk us through the amount of revenue, if you can, or this may be something they have to get back to us on, but I want to pose the question, because I'd love to have you walk us through the amount of revenue generated for the district when comparing Gambit DC and private operators for the past 3 fiscal years. But as a starting point, if you
well, the question I have.
Let me finish this though, because I want to.
Sorry.
It's a 2-part question. As a starting point, I'd love for you to share the numbers forecasted by the Office of the Chief Financial Officer when the underlying law was before the council. And I referenced that in my opening statement, and I'm happy to get it to you. But what's the current amount generated from Gambit DC and private operators, and what do we anticipate to collect by the end of the fiscal year? So I'm throwing it out there, and maybe your team can help if you can't give us an immediate answer to that. I'm over my time, and I want to be respectful of that. Do you have something really quickly you want to say before I turn?
I want to make sure I understand your question, because I think you were going this year, but then you said, are you asking this year's numbers or?
Yeah, so I wanted, as a starting point, I wanted to have you share the numbers forecasted by the OCFO when the underlying law was before the council, because I think it's great context.
Yeah.
And then I also want to know the current amount generated from Gambit DC and private operators, and what do we anticipate to collect by the end of this fiscal year? That was the question.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try to make sure I answer that, but I will apologize if I don't get it completely like you want. So the original fiscal impact statement that was provided back before we even started showed that for 2022, the total net revenue would be 29.7 million. 2021 would have been 28.3 million. 2020 would have been 26 million. And then in 2019, it would have been 7.69, so 7.7 million.
Okay. And then the other part of the question, I don't need you to answer now because I want to be respectful of members' times. If you can just make sure you have an answer when we start back in my next round, as well as the current amount generated from Gambit DC and private operators, and what do we anticipate to collect by the end of the fiscal year? I'm going to turn to Councilmember Shade for her initial round, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Suarez, for being here today. The committee chair asked you what would account for the our system's poor performance, certainly in the initial stages. And I wrote down, you said, well, we had a new brand, so we had to get over that. We had an 80% payout, and then we had easy access to other jurisdictions. And so as these things are being worked out, we're on our way to a better operation. But I wanted to ask you something which came up when this contract was being considered. It's not often that we have this information, but we did in this case, that the contract, the initial contract, would have multiple subcontractors, individuals who had little or no experience in providing services related to sports wagering. To what extent were our inexperienced subcontractors responsible for the fumbling in the beginning?
Well, not sure that you can say it's from inexperience. Intralot actually has quite a few jurisdictions internationally where they do sports betting, and they run sports betting in several jurisdictions internationally. So they're not new to sports betting. I would say they're probably newer.
Can I interrupt you? I'm talking about the subcontractors that Intralot was going to rely on here, not what they could have tapped into around the world, but the individuals that we had in mind here.
Okay. I'm trying to think what specific sports betting subcontractors are occurring, and I'm sorry, got to fix some sound that's happening beside us here. But the subcontractors that we have, that Intralot has, I don't know of any that are specific to sports betting, other than overall lottery.
Okay. Now the other thing is, in talking to the chairman, I thought you said, which I'm curious about, okay, we fumbled in the beginning, but now our system is better than the other systems.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Is that your statement?
Yes.
And it's better because why?
Because per capita, when you think about the actual money going into the fund, right? How much revenue per person in the jurisdiction? Because it's really important to understand, you can't compare total numbers next to like a Virginia that's 13 times our size, right? You have to really look at it on a per capita basis. And when you look at it on a per capita basis, we outperform most of the states that have that a 10% revenue or tax rate. And we're performing pretty well compared to private operators now.
Okay, we're performing pretty well. I really have to get underneath this, because you're basically saying that we have fumbled and stumbled our way into the most ideal system we could have.
Well, there are other systems that would work more, but I don't think everyone would be happy to know, particularly private operators, that a sole operator system would actually generate the biggest amount. Or the other option, to be clear, is a much higher tax rate.
And then the other thing is, this per capita performance in terms of, what we take in as revenue, that also can be adjusted. But per capita, how many people are gambling from the different jurisdictions? Because I'm sure that if we have a lot of seniors and a lot of children and a lot of different, how are you going to count them per capita? I mean, what is the pool that we ought to compare this to? Is it just, general population?
Well, I think it's hard because every state has different, age restrictions and things like that to compare without doing the entire population. But because you use entire population and across jurisdictions, it should even out any of that bias.
And then what would be the cost to us if we terminated the contract with Intralaw?
I haven't generated those costs specifically, but I would tell you that we would have to reimburse them for a lot of their investments in the equipment, in the sports book, in people, a lot of the things that they've sort of committed to the district and invested in. But we don't have a number specifically because we've not done that calculation.
What do you think would be the cost of switching to a sort of free market system where we allow private vendors to come in and then just tax their profits?
I think based on the current law, right? So one of the things I explained in the testimony, based on the current law, we can tax up to 20%. They have to do 3 times as much and handle that than Gambit does to get close to the transfer that we're providing. So the cost is we're going to go up in regulatory expenses because we have more private operators to regulate, and it's going to take them quite a bit. I don't really know that they could actually match that to get to the same transfer amount as Gambit, to increase it by 300%.
But remember, you said the law, we make the law,
Right.
and we can change the law. We can do as we see fit. And other than your explanation along those lines, we have seen in other jurisdictions how very popular and very successful these, private vendor operations are. And we should have started that way at the beginning, but we did not. And then in the beginning, we were told that we had a rush and have this sole source contract. We had a rush, because we had to get out there and you were talking about building the brand. We had to get out there because once people bet with your system, they have loyalty to that system. And we had to capture them first before they had loyalty to Virginia or Maryland, wherever. How did that dynamic actually work out?
If you look at revenue for the first year, we didn't have any revenue because we ended up investing in building the brand. But a lot of those investments are paying off now.
So do we have, with our brand building, we spent all of our money on brand building and we didn't take any bets the first year?
No, we took bets. They just didn't offset the costs.
I see. Okay. And so now that you say that the brand is built, first of all, I see stuff about FanDuel and all these other places. I don't see anything about your operation.
Right.
So I don't know what you're building or what notoriety you're getting, but
well, we're managing our costs. So we're
I'm
trying
not a gambler, but I don't see anything from you all.
Right.
Entice me to participate with you.
And that's very purposeful because you are not our core target. So I would say that we're being very efficient in the way that we're marketing because we're not trying to market to the wide audience. We're trying to be very efficient and effective.
So how do you market? How do you market?
Yeah, right now, a lot of our marketing is through digital, social media and digital, where before we started with a much broader campaign, it was, a lot radio and outdoor and all these other channels, which are okay when you're doing awareness. But I think for us now, we're really trying to make sure we're managing costs and we're targeting our messaging. And so the best way to do that is digitally, because it's also where a player can take action immediately. So if they're online, they see our ad, they can go take action.
So I'm online.
But you're not our target.
Yeah. How do you know who your target is? Who is your target?
So we tend to look younger male, tends to be sort
I'm
of the
neither
target.
younger nor male. That's true. Go ahead.
So yeah, 24 to 35, actually maybe a little bit older than that, 45. So that tends to be the target. So we could reach you, but you would not typically fit that profile.
No, I don't. Well, are you saying then that the marketing of these other entities is wasteful? FanDuel and Caesars and
Well, if you look at how their operations have been, and that's one thing to always keep in mind, that here in the district, we don't get the information of what they spend on their marketing, how that impacts their costs. But several of the private operators have been operating at a loss, and are just now being able to turn that around when you look at the overall operations.
do you have deals like bet $5 and you'll win
Yeah.
100?
Yes, we do promotions. Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, for this rounder, my time is running out. How many states have mobile sports betting, and does anybody else have a sole source contract that you know of?
I know total states that have mobile, let's see, 13 have been within the last year. There's the jurisdictions that were sort of grandfathered in that also have mobile sort of active. The Oregons and the Nevada, Montana, but each jurisdiction is sort of very unique in the way that they do some of the mobile.
Do any have a sole source contract?
Yes.
Which
Yes.
ones?
So Rhode Island does,
Mhm.
by the way, is the best performing state of those. And New Hampshire also has sort of that model right now. They actually have a contract with Intralot to do retail if they want. They've not executed that part yet, but they have FanDuel. I believe it's FanDuel up there in New Hampshire.
Okay. All right. I'm over my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Che. I want to turn, I know that there are videos on, but I do want to turn to Councilmember Henderson if she's with us for an initial round. Perfect.
I'm here. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Beautiful.
Chairman. Good afternoon, Director Suarez. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. So I think when we first met and had a conversation about sports betting, you were pretty honest and just basically said, yep, the estimate was way off, given the size of our jurisdiction, and that, had you been in the position at the time that the council was considering it, you would have put forward a different number in comparison to, say, I think what we talked about, North Carolina at the time, in comparison. I'm sure you were listening to some of the public witness testimony. Do you feel confident that we can right the ship, if you will, by maintaining the exact same program design that we currently have now? Or are there other suggested changes that you would like to see to help with administration of the program?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Good question. And one thing just to clarify, when we spoke, one of the points and the point that I wanted to make about what was said before and the expectations, it's very early on. And so the data that was provided was very limited. And I think that's what led to those much higher expectations. But I think, as I put in my testimony, I want to make sure everyone really has sort of heard the ship is riding already. All right. So Gambit DC handle is up significantly this year. The transfer is up. It's over double what the private operators are providing in tax revenue. Everything points to the right direction, that the model is working as it should now. It may have not been working before like we thought. Gambit may have required more investment or a bigger brand building effort than we anticipated, back when we were sort of enacting the law. But now all the numbers show that what we're doing is the right thing. You have Gambit there to provide sort of stability. The contract with Gambit ensures that we get 10% of handle before expenses, regardless of what Interlock Sportsbook pays out, right? Regardless of what Gambit Sportsbook pays out, we will get 10% before expenses. The revenue from private operators isn't assured or guaranteed, and we're seeing that now. It's 38% down, right? Why would we want to increase the risk? Why would we want to make it so that we rely even more on a riskier revenue stream? And so to me, the model is working. It took a minute, right? It didn't work quite as planned. Our retail rollout was slower and later. And that was based on some decisions made at that time. But I think everything now points to it's working like it should and should continue to grow and provide the bigger share of the profits in the district to the district. Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman Henderson, or Councilmember Henderson, you're on mute.
My bad. In comparison to other jurisdictions, are the tax that we charge, are we competitive?
Ours at 10% is, I mean, there are several jurisdictions that are that low, and then there are several that are higher, right? So like Pennsylvania is at 36%. New York just launched at 51.
I'm sorry, 51%?
51%, because they understood what they could command, right? For all of the players in the district, in that jurisdiction. In New Hampshire and Rhode Island, they don't tax, they have a revenue share of 51%.
Okay.
And it's a sole operator. And so they perform very well. If you look, at, Virginia's 15%, you've got sort of it runs from 6.75% in Iowa, all the way up to, like I said, 51% in New York. If you look at our per capita performance on actual revenue, when you compare us to most of the states around that 10%, we actually outperform a lot of them.
Okay.
And part of that is because we also have Gambit included, right? Which provides a higher share. So it goes beyond the 10%.
Okay. So I was listening, I think, to a little bit of the exchange that you had with Councilmember McDuffie. And you kind of said something in passing that I want to go back to around the geofencing of physical locations. And you were saying, it could be confusing for some people, but you mentioned a stat of the number of people who have tried to, or the number of bets that have been tried to be placed, but have been rejected. What was that number again?
225,000, basically, or almost 225,000 transactions have failed in those zones, both the Shipstead Loose Act, the federal enclave, as well as in the 2-block exclusionary zones since we started. And this year alone, it's been about 88,000.
Okay, so that's like what happens in those situations?
You hope that,
like, do they realize, like, oh wait, I gotta cross the street? Or
we try to help make sure they understand. But it really just depends on where you're at, and it's really hard. So I would tell you that most of those transactions just aren't repeated, or if they are, a small number repeated later, because you don't know how far really you need to go, right? Imagine being a player and you're somewhere in the federal enclave, or let's make it easier. I'm at the 2-block radius over by BetMGM in the yards. How far do I need to go before I can actually use it? I don't know. What is 2 blocks, right? Because that's always hard to know. Sometimes it's easy, and sometimes the way and plus players don't really know that it's 2 blocks, right? We all know it's 2 blocks, but players don't really completely understand what those restrictions are.
So no one is getting a message that is like, you are too far, in a similar vein as, like, if you try to, park a scooter in an area that's geofenced off, you'll get a notification that, like, you can't end your ride here. You must.
You will get one after you, at least with Gambit, you will get one after you make the attempt. And right now we have an enhancement coming with a location pop-up when you actually open the app. We just haven't been able to launch that yet, but that will let you know sort of the boundaries so that you understand where you're at.
Okay, so we can't do anything about the federal enclave piece, but In terms of the 2-block radius of the physical location,
Yeah.
is that common?
No.
Do you happen to know the backstory here? I mean, I could go back.
I've been told a little bit, but I really can't speak to it since I wasn't here as to why. There's a 2-block exclusionary zone. I'm surprised because a lot of what we hear from private operators is they want to open up competition, but that actually limits competition. So I don't really know the story behind it very well.
Okay. All right. Well, I have to dig in a little bit more there. Thank you, Councilmember McDuffie. I don't have any further questions. If he's here. There he is. All right. Thank you. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Now we're going to turn next to Councilmember Silverman.
Great, thank you. Mr. Suarez, it's nice to meet you in person or virtually at least. So let me begin. You said in your testimony that there were, quote, extremely high expectations for sports betting in 2018. I think this is on page 5. So are you saying
Yes.
that the revenue projections sold to the council in 2018 were unrealistic?
I'm saying they were as good as they could be based on the information they had back then. So my understanding, and please bear with me a little bit, Councilman Silverman, I wasn't here, but I know some of the data that went into it. They were looking at states like New Jersey, with phenomenal numbers. And I don't think it's very easy for any jurisdiction to match those numbers that New Jersey had. Plus, you have to also understand where we were in terms of our size, and our model is very different in terms of having retail sports books that are a few miles, available to most people in the district. So, yeah, I would say with the information that they had, and it's very limited because we were very early on in adopting sports wagering compared to any of the other jurisdictions. They were pretty high.
Okay, so I take that as they're unrealistic. So you just told my at-large colleague, as well as my Ward 3 colleague, that, quote, the model is working.
Mhm.
But that simply doesn't make sense because I was here.
Mhm.
So as Councilmember Chase said, CFO DeWitt and Lottery Director Bresnahan argued to us that we needed to sole source and move quickly to have first mover advantage. And that's because the daytime population doubles in our city, right? At least pre-COVID. So half our workers pre-COVID were from Maryland and Virginia. And the idea is that we'd move first and we'd hook all these Maryland and Virginia workers onto the Gambit app and create a habit, right? Before they could hook onto something else. But of course, COVID happened, right?
Yes.
And a lot of these workers that were in the modeling for Gambit and for our revenue projections work from home, and they continue to work from home. I mean, this is a real dilemma for our city for many reasons. And so, and help me out with the status. Maryland has, does Maryland have a sports betting program now?
Right now, they're live in casinos.
They're live in
And
casinos.
They're working on launching mobile and online soon.
Okay, and Virginia?
Virginia is mobile online only right now.
Okay, so we have a Virginia workers can use an app, if I'm understanding you correctly, and Maryland workers can't, or Maryland residents can bet at the casino. So how can this model be working? If it was based on first mover advantage, that we would have all these Maryland and Virginia workers that would be sports betting and therefore contributing to our revenue. And that model's totally out the window. So how can you tell me that things are working?
I think you have to make sure that you understand that that's not the only part of the model. And no matter how you change the model, it can never address the fact that workers are not commuting into the city like they were before, right? You were very correct that there was the expectation, as it used to happen, that the district's population pretty much doubled every day, right? Not happening anymore.
Right.
Not sure when we get close to even having that again, if we do. But that's not the biggest part of the model. The model itself is not about commuters coming in only. It's about, do we have a sole operator model, right? And some competitive private operators coexisting together. And we do have that. And it's a sole operator providing.
Mr. Suarez? So we also have an app that doesn't work half the time, especially on the most.
I don't think that's true.
Well, okay. Let me ask you. I apologize. As I mentioned, I had to toggle in and out of the hearing, so I'm not sure if anyone's gone through the Super Bowl fiasco with you yet. Has somebody gone through that with you?
Not yet.
Okay, well then let's do that. So, so my understanding, I'm a big sports fan, you may or may not know, but not football. The Colts left Baltimore when I moved there, and that was it for me with football. But my understanding is that the Super Bowl is the biggest gambling day of the year. Am I wrong about that?
It's one of the biggest.
Okay. And so, and you can bet on all kinds of things, like not just on the team who wins and loses, but on the score and on pretty much every play, right? So there's a lot of money to exchange and a lot of money to be made. But my understanding is that our app, Gambit, went down for, it was it Apple users on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yes.
Okay. And, so obviously we lost out on a lot of money. Is that correct?
Not correct. No.
Okay. Why did we not lose out on a lot of money if our app didn't work on Super Bowl Sunday?
The app was working up until I think about 4 o'clock that day. So
okay, but game time is
placing wagers up until
but the game is at 6:30, isn't it?
Yeah, let me sort of explain sort of some of that. So yes, up to 4 o'clock, it worked. Players couldn't do it on the mobile app on Apple, but they could do it online, through the website. And when we calculated sort of what we expected and what we were netting out in GGR, we lost about $63,000. Because while you may have a large handle, right, a large amount of bets, the payouts tend to be very, very high on that day. And so, for example, what I will give you is the biggest sports book in the district, Caesars William Hill, in February, provided $6,000 in tax revenue. $6,000. So,
and is that possibly because our tax rate is just too low at 10%? You're saying other states are like at 50%.
Potentially up to 50. So tax rate is one.
So our tax rate is too low.
Multiply the 6,000 by 5. But multiply the 6,000 by 5.
Well, how much money did MGM?
Yeah, the payout is.
How much did MGM at National Harbor make on, which is just our neighbor down 295 on Super Bowl Sunday?
I don't know what they made on Super Bowl Sunday, but I can tell you that in February, the tax revenue we got from them was $18,900, and their handle was about $3.5 million.
But MGM is at Nationals ballpark, is that correct?
Oh, no, not that MGM is at the Nat Stadium, yes.
Yeah, who's betting on the Super Bowl at Nat Stadium? Right?
Well, they have whoever, is in that area.
I know, but it's not, that's what my point is. I mean, but let's get back on track here, Mr.
Can I sort of answer your question? I want to make sure I answer your question.
Yeah, this is about what happened.
The mobile app outage, right?
Yeah.
So I think the one thing I want to make sure you understand is that's not exclusive to Gambit DC either. It's not an excuse. It should never have happened. But FanDuel, BetMGM, and DraftKings in 2021 had mobile app outages. They had outages
on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yes. And it's just some of what happens in the industry because of the amount of, transactions that are going on. Now, that wasn't our issue. Ours was due to an expired certificate, but it does happen. And everyone has experienced.
Let me pause you there, Mr. Suarez. So there are some outages is what I'm hearing from you because there's demand, the incredible demand. But that wasn't our issue is what you're saying.
Well, I can't explain why they were out, so I don't want to explain for them. My
Well,
whole
but-
point
so I'm
is that
saying you're trying to create confusion or say, oh,
no,
outages
what I want to do
happen.
is,
But I'm saying,
Councilmember Silverman, what I want to do is make sure it's clear because we're making it appear as though Gambit is unique in having had an issue on Super Bowl Sunday. And my point to you all is it is not unique. The big players, the ones that we say can do this way better, also have had those issues.
okay, but they're different issues is my point, Mr. Suarez. Their issues are because there's such incredible demand for their apps that they can't handle the number of users and
can't
there's a
say that that's
temporary
true.
outage. Well, I thought that's
You-
what you just
No,
said.
I'm not sure. I don't want to speak to
Okay,
why. I
then
believe that
then
some of
why
that
are we
was that.
talking about this at all? I mean, our issue was a certificate issue and the app went down completely on Super Bowl Sunday. Is that
It-
not correct?
It did, but yes. But
Okay,
if we're
I'm out
saying
of
that
time, Mr.
competitors, that the
Suarez.
private operators are better at that, that is not true.
okay, well, the private operators have an incredible demand for betting, and they're just trying to keep up with it. But I'm out of time and I want to be respectful to my colleagues. I'll see you in the next round. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Sounds good,
Councilmember
thanks.
McDuffie.
Thank you, Councilmember Silverman. Mr. Suarez, I want to go back and talk about the existing contract briefly. I know it came up in your question. I believe it was with Councilmember Che.
Yep.
But I also want to go back to the auditor's report. I think there were some good things discussed in it. The auditor suggested that the agency eliminate its obligation to cover the contractor's other direct operating expenses. What operating expenses exactly does OLG currently cover under the contract? I know this has come up.
Yes, the only ones that I'm aware of are we make sure that we pay marketing costs. So we provide the marketing funding, which is no different than what we do for lottery right now. And also the credit card fees. So those transactional fees that you pay for merchants to process credit cards or debit cards and all of that, which also is no different than we do for iLottery now. I believe those are the only ones. I do have our ACFO, Craig Lindsay, if he can add any others, I'm forgetting, but those are the two main ones that I can think of.
So let's just take those two then, marketing and credit card. You said it's no different than what you do under the current lottery contract. Is it different than what is typical for sports wagering in other jurisdictions?
I know I can tell you the other intra-lot state is no different. So that's Montana.
Okay.
And I have to look at the other sole operators. So in New Hampshire and Rhode Island, I'd have to find out if they cover those marketing costs or not.
Can you find that out and let us
Yes,
know?
we will follow up and get that to you.
Okay. And I was talking about revenue a little bit earlier. How much revenue came in 2022?
In 2022, when you say revenue, do you mean handle or do you mean tax revenue?
I
So
wasn't sure if there was something else coming. Go ahead.
yeah. So the handle that we've gotten in fiscal year 22 to date is 45.6 million. And then so far transfer to the fund is around 2.157 million estimated.
Okay. And
For
then
Gambit.
how do you explain the difference between the transfer and the handle?
That has to do with the payout for the most part. So, you know,
How much
at
of it is
90%.
payout versus expenses?
Yeah, I'll have to let Craig, I'm not sure if you're able to sort of provide that breakdown. Do you have it? So
yes. I'm Craig Lindsay, the AFO for Office of Lottery and Gaming. Yeah, the $39.7 million of it is relegated to payout.
And
So 39 million of the 45 is payout.
Okay, and so does that mean 6 million of it is what
So
exactly?
And so then you have a portion of it that is the intralot, the contracted payout percentage to the vendor of 42.5%
Of 6 million.
of the, correct, of the 6 million, which is the NGR, the net gaming revenue. You
Okay.
have their payout percentage of that. And then what you have are the costs that the director previously spoke about, the marketing costs, the credit card fees. And
How much of
then one
marketing and
additional
credit card? How much of those?
the
Just
credit,
total, if you got it.
it's about 800,000, and then you also have commissions to retailers. That's another 390.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think it was last year, but it was actually this year doing, I believe it was performance when you mentioned, and I referenced earlier, that sports wagering came up, ended up in the red, correct? Mr. Suarez?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
What do you estimate to be, what's the fits for FY 2022? What's the expectation?
Yeah, 2022, we are expecting to have basically almost 1.5 million in revenue is what was in the forecast.
And where are we right now?
We're at 2.2. So we're
2.2?
over that. Yeah.
Okay, and that's 2.2 net minus whatever you're paying
Minus
out.
all
from
the
other
expenses and all of that.
Okay, so you're
Yes.
coming in above the estimated
Right.
revenue.
Right.
And I believe in the auditor's report, I think you all indicated in one of your responses that the direct costs contained in the contract are necessary for the successful operation of a sports book. This is sort of the same line of questions, and I know you were going to look at, I think maybe another, I think you said the other jurisdiction where Interlot has a contract, it is common, but if you could get back to us on what other jurisdictions exist
Yeah, we'll do
that have
that.
sports betting where a state pays for operating expenses of a sports betting operator. And did any of those states, frankly, who do experience the same level of losses as a result? I would love to know that.
Okay.
And I asked this of one of the public witnesses, I believe it was Mr. Mandel, but is there anything in the contract that you all have that would prohibit OLG from issuing licenses to private operators to operate a district-wide mobile sports wagering platform right now, in addition to the existing operations that you currently have with Gambit DC?
No, my understanding, and originally can confirm the exact language, but my understanding is the way the legislation reads now is we do have the option to do a 20% GGR tax on private operators if we did mobile and online across the district, whichever we feel would net out a bigger tax revenue or revenue in general, I should say.
Okay. Have you all done any analysis about that? I mean,
Yeah.
do you have information about what, or insights into what the district would have generated in tax revenue had it directly licensed or contracted with a limited number of private mobile?
Yeah, I don't have it
operators?
for the past. What I referenced in my testimony today was if we looked at fiscal year to date,
Right.
and to get to the 2.2 million that Gambit DCS transferred, private operators would have to multiply the 45.6 million and handle by 300%. So 3 times that to get to the 2.2 million at a 20% rate.
What does that mean practically for revenue generated to the district? Is that something that's impossible? I mean, I hear you making that statement, and I'm curious as to the practical implications of what would happen if the district were to add
Yeah.
private mobile sports betting operators?
It seems difficult to me, Chairman, and the reason I say that is right now, private operators at their retail locations are about 18.9% growth in handle.
Mhm.
Gambit is at a 31% growth in handle. To grow at 300% seems pretty significant. And please remember, Maryland hasn't even started their mobile
Right.
and online, and that's going to make it harder.
Right. Okay. My time has expired for the second round. Let's turn to Councilmember Ray Che for a second round. If Councilmember Che is not with us, then we will turn to Councilmember, I don't see Councilmember Henderson or Gray. So I'm going to turn to Councilmember Silverman for a second round.
Okay, thank you so much, Councilmember McDuffie. Mr. Suarez, let's stay on the Super Bowl for a moment. Okay, so if I understand you correctly, there was a certificate issue that led to a failure of the app. Who's responsible for that?
That was an intralot issue.
And what repercussions were there for intralot?
Yes. So we ended up settling with them or an agreement where they provided $500,000 to the district to make up for that. $63,000 of that is what we expected in GGR. $6,300 of that was what we paid in a promotion that we did really quickly to sort of incentivize people to go to the website instead of going to the app. And then the rest of that was really just remuneration for the district for any potential, future marketing that we can do and brand building to overcome sort of that issue and any potential players we may have lost during that time.
Okay. And that was through an agreement between DC Lottery and the Attorney General and Intralot, or who negotiated that agreement?
No, we negotiated that with Intralot directly.
And so how did you settle on $500,000 being the appropriate number?
Yeah, well, it had to do again with what we sort of estimated was the loss based on what our handle was last year during Super Bowl, what growth we anticipated this year had we not had the app outage, and the payouts and our expenses and all that. And that came to about $63,000 that we felt like we potentially lost directly.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, a little bit for promotion that we had to pay for to incentivize players. And then the rest of it really was just to overcome that sort of brand issue or the marketing to try and bring players back that we may have lost during that time.
Okay. And to that point, did you see a decrease in users and participation, in the app because of the outage Super Bowl Sunday?
We saw a slight one right after Super Bowl, but I will tell you that it's hard to measure because you always see a dip after Super Bowl. And then also we had the NBA All-Star game, which was moved by a week, and that caused sort of a decline because you didn't have your normal NBA game. So there's a lot of variables that went into that.
Okay.
But we have more than overcome that. I'm not sure if you heard before, but we're up 31%.
Up from what?
From year to date versus last year at the same time period. And
right, but the thing is, our app was performing so poorly that, I guess we could keep going down, but there's really only one way to go but up, right?
Yeah, or it could continue to perform badly.
Okay. I guess I'm just saying, if you're performing optimally,
yeah,
going 31% up is like a really big deal. But if you're performing extremely poorly and you go up, it's like, well, you're performing marginally less poorly, is my point.
Okay, well, I can tell you that the last 2 months, we've had more wagers than any other private operators in the district combined. Our wagers are up 49%. Understood that it's below, but again, we're at 45.6 million in handle, and we have a $2.2 million return, which is more than double than the private operators.
Okay. I do want to get to the lottery, but let me ask you this. So you said there were high expectations, and then as you said, the who is going to bet sort of changed. So who is not betting who we thought was going to bet using the gambling app, the Gambit app?
Couple things. One, I believe you mentioned this before, but the idea of the commuter base that was coming in. So the idea that we had a lot of commuters from Maryland and Virginia, that's not happening. And the second one is we expected casual bettors, like a much bigger degree of casual bettors that weren't as, what would I say, as focused on payout. And instead we have a lot of very savvy, experienced bettors that are really shopping around for the payout.
Can I pause you? So casual bettors meaning tourists, or meaning someone like me who's like, oh, okay, let me bet on this and that game.
Right. Folks who've never bet before really, or haven't maybe done it once when they were in Vegas or whatever, and just every so often would sort of place a bet. I think the assumption was they're not too worried about what the payouts are. They sort of bet because it's convenient and they, have an event that they're interested in. That did not play out.
Okay. Let me switch to the lottery. Do you think our lottery is performing well?
Well, this last year, we transferred more than we did in 2019, which was the year before the pandemic. So I think the performance is better now. I think there are several things that we're working on and working to improve, in terms of our optimizing the selection of our scratch games and some of the equipment that we have out there, trying to update that. But I would say, based on the numbers, the performance is in a much better place than it was during the pandemic.
Okay, well, I'm looking at transfers from lottery over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much we're going down. You're right, 20 and 21, we did go up. But there's just generally been, like, it's just to visualize for the public, going like this.
Yes.
And we have the same contractor for the lottery that we do for sports betting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's troubling for me, because the lottery used to be a fairly significant source of revenue for our city, and it's becoming weaker and weaker. So we have an underperforming lottery run by an underperforming sports betting contractor who's our lottery contractor. Like, why should we keep this thing?
Keep which thing?
Keep the contract.
Well, one, just to be clear, it's not run by Intralot. So we run it. Intralot provides the software and the gaming system and the sports book that does all the odds generation, all of that. But we do, we run it here in OLG. And I think, we're making enhancements. We're improving. Like I said, last year, we raised transfer to where it was pre-pandemic. So you're seeing an upswing. I think there were decisions in the past that were made that really hurt the lottery. One I will call out for you is when the scratch contracts were not approved. And the year after that, the lottery's transfer declined 15 million. That's significant. And we've not been able to overcome that and bring that back. When we went completely dark on scratch offs, we lost a lot of that player base that went to Virginia and Maryland. And so there are things that we're trying to recover from that are taking much more time. And then with the loss of commuters, which was also providing a big revenue stream, we're also trying to make up for that too.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Councilmember McDuffie.
Thank you, Councilmember. We're gonna do a third round for anybody who's interested. So if you want to stick around, anybody else, my members, I think we lost the rest of them, but I would do a brief third round. So I'm gonna try to get these answers as concise as possible, if you could, Mrs. Suarez. Virginia legalized mobile sports wagering in 2020. How many operators currently operate a statewide mobile sports betting device? And how does the Commonwealth's revenue figures compare to DC's?
The number of operators in Virginia, I believe, are 14. And I think they increased the ability to have 17. So, but right now they're at 14.
And their revenue figures compared to ours?
Are you asking per capita or total? Because total is significant.
Okay, I mean, I'm at, let's do per capita.
Jurisdiction.
You can do both. If you have both of those numbers, you can just give us the
Yes.
overall.
Yeah,
and then
so
the per capita.
their total tax revenue for Virginia, and again, this is for year to date, to
Yep.
just give you a comparison, because I wanted the latest. In Virginia was about 14 million. When you break that down per capita, they're at $1.63 compared to us at $2.47.
Got it. Okay, and then Maryland legalized sports wagering in 2021, and currently they only has the you mentioned earlier just their retail operations, but in the process of finalizing rulemaking for the mobile. In Maryland, up to how many licenses can the state issue for statewide mobile operations?
That's a good question. I know they're still working through their mobile.
If your team, anybody on your team knows what they passed, and then if you could let us know before the end of the roundtable, I want to keep moving.
Yep, we'll get that for you.
So if Maryland and Virginia communities come to DC, there's some of them that are still coming for work. There's still lots, I think, coming, not enough, but they're coming back for dinner. But they cannot use their mobile sports wagering apps, correct?
In Maryland?
Yeah.
Yeah, the mobile is not live in Maryland. Yep.
No, I mean, if they come to the district but have apps in other places, can they use them here?
No.
Okay. Is Gambit DC available in Virginia?
No.
And does the current contractor offer mobile sports wagering in any other? You said it. What other state did you say that they offer mobile?
Montana.
Montana. That's the only.
But it's a little bit different because in Montana, their legislation requires that they can only use mobile at the location, the retail location. So it's not statewide. It's only at the location they can use it.
How do the revenues in Montana compare to the revenues here?
Montana is
overall and per capita.
Lower. Let me see. Hold on just a quick second. I can find that. I will tell you that they can have up to 60 mobile licenses in Maryland. That's what I'm told.
Okay. So, and it really begs the question for me, is there any real reason to believe that Maryland and Virginia commuters, or even tourists for that matter, who outside of Maryland, Virginia, are downloading Gambit DC, or are we simply foregoing the revenue we could be capturing from those customers and customers from states around the country that are tourists here if they have their own apps?
I think we'd have to analyze that to know truly what scale that is of anyone that's coming into the district and wanting to place a bet on an app that they use somewhere else.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think it's worth analyzing because, I'm sort of curious, again, going back to what I think most council members who favor sports wagering, the goal is to maximize revenue, and we're not really seeing, I know you're saying things are going up, but when the bar is so low,
but I would venture
it's something that we should expect, frankly, and we'd like to see a more precipitous increase.
I would venture, Chairman McDuffie, that total doesn't equal 3 times the 45.6 million that in handle that Gambit has now.
Okay. Real quick on the retail portion, the auditors report, in that report, they recommended that the OLG grant additional licenses to private operators. At the time of the report, back last year in September, the district had 2 Class A license holders, to William Hill and Capital One, and BetMGM National Park, which had just launched.
Yes.
And 1 Class B license holder, Grand Central. What were the original 2018 predictions on the number of Class A and B license holders the OCFO had originally forecasted would exist by this fiscal year?
Right. I'll have to get you the Class Bs. I can tell you that Class A's, we only have the 4 locations. So we have 3 of those already taken, and St. Elizabeth's would be the last one. So those are the only ones we could have.
And Audi Field just
Just
got
started.
their license.
Just
Right.
started. Yeah,
Okay.
been June 30th.
What's the status of St. Elizabeth's?
There actually is some interest in that. There's a joint venture that's trying to see if that's some place that they would like to be in. They're working with DSLBD on that in terms of the joint venture piece. And so there is interest in St. Elizabeth's right now, but they're still working through, is it viable or not, and how they would go about doing that.
Okay, and what other Class B licenses really quickly has OLG issued since the auditor's report was released?
Yeah, so the auditor report was before we had Grand Central, so they didn't include that in their report.
But was that pending though? I think was it pending though during auditor's report or not?
The auditor's report came out, I remember, right when I got here, and that was the end of August. Grand Central didn't get approved and start until October. So maybe it was pending, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Any new Class B since then?
There is a Class B that's being worked through. And they're, again, same thing. They're sort of working through whether it's joint venture and how they're going to sort of approach that and continue to move forward on that. So
when did they apply?
We have, Peter, do you know the date of the application?
Let's let them think about that. I'm going to come back shortly. I want to turn it to Councilmember Silverman for
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember McDuffie. Mr. Suarez, so let's go back to the transfers from the lottery for a moment. So when I'm looking at transfers from the lottery, this includes both the revenue from the lottery and sports wagering?
It is when you look at it from when we launched, yes.
Okay, so is the uptick in 2021 just the additional sports wagering revenue?
No, because remember in 21, we didn't have a transfer from sports wagering. So
okay,
that's all lottery.
So it's all, okay, so when did the sports wagering money start to come in?
Well, we had a little bit in 2020. I think there was a little over 300,000 then. And then in 2022, now we're at 2.2 million estimated.
Okay, but there was no transfer of money from sports wagering in 21.
Right.
Okay, so what accounts for the uptick in 21 from 30? So was it just that there was an incredible decline because of COVID? People weren't going to the Giant to buy their scratch tickets?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely a lot about, the lack of other entertainment options and the ability to access lottery much easily during this time. Also, we know that there were stimuluses and different things that were put into the economy that sort of helped some of those numbers during that time. We also did launch iLottery. So we tried to make it much more convenient for folks who couldn't go to the store, weren't comfortable. They could then go ahead and play the games online as well.
Okay, so that's, so going to the Wayback Machine, when we had these hearings in like 2018 and 2019, I remember the big thing was that we need to digitize our lottery, right? Because we got to get millennials to play the lottery, and they're not going to Giant like I did when I was a kid with my dad, and we'd be like, oh, let's play the lottery, and my dad would say, we're probably not going to win anything, but it's fun. And we buy a scratch ticket. And but millennials, I'm told, don't do that. They do everything on their phone, and so everything's got to be on the phone. And basically, the reason why I will admit, Mr. Suarez, I'm so skeptical is because my understanding is that Intralot and our lottery was way behind in terms of digitizing. Yes. So, okay, good. We're on common ground here.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, I think we needed to launch that. And so that's, yes, I would say.
And so how's that going? Because I don't see a lot of I don't hear a lot of my staff who are in their 20s talking about playing the lottery on their phone.
Yeah, well, millennials are really hard to get because they just, lottery isn't as relevant to them. And I always say, I want to get younger players, but I'm not talking about in their 20s. We just want that.
Okay, you want old fogies like me.
Well, in 30s,
in their late 40s.
They're younger than me, but the 30s to 40s would be great.
Well, but my
And-
peers aren't playing the lottery on their phone either.
Right.
So who's playing the lottery at this point?
Yeah, well, we have about 22,000 people registered on iLottery right now. And it continues to grow. We launched it not this past December, but the December before that.
Here's the
and
thing,
we are
Mr.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Mr. Swartz, I think the thing is you give me numbers and you say that they're rosy, and I don't have anything to compare them to. So therefore it's a little meaningless because when you said 22,000, I'm thinking, is that a big number or is that a little number? I'm thinking that's kind of a little number because, I mean, as I said, like in 2001, we were generating $84 million from our lottery and our budget was a lot smaller, right? We probably had a $10 billion budget at that point. So that was I'm told that it was smaller than 10. So that was significant, but now we're only like generating 48 million and we got a $19.5 billion budget. So it's become, it's really, I guess I've made my point, but okay, I now I'm under pressure because the sands of time are running out. I'm concerned that we're not updating our lottery, and our lottery, we'll have to see in 2022 whether 21 was an aberration or not. But there has been a pattern of lottery revenue declining. You're telling me our sports betting program is improving, but as Councilmember McDuffie said, it's like going from the bottom of the basement to maybe the first or second floor. So it's hard to say that's a rosy picture.
You can compare it to other jurisdictions per capita and it's better. So, we can say that the growth is only because we were at the bottom, but you can look at how much revenue we're providing per capita compared to Virginia, compared to Colorado, compared to a lot of the states, and we're better.
Let me ask you one final question because my time is up. But so we might have a disagreement about the performance of our sports betting program. But if we as a council decided, we made the wrong decision here, what do we do to go to a private market app system? How much would that cost us?
I think we'd have to calculate what we owe Intralot, given sort of their investment, and see and understand what that cost is. I don't have that calculation. We've not done that analysis or work with them to know. So that would be a cost. And then, as I've stated before, the private operators will have to generate 3 times the amount of handle that Gambit has generated year to date to get close to the transfer amount that Gambit has generated so far.
Okay.
So I would venture that you'd lose because I don't think they would generate that.
Okay. And how long is this contract for? It's 5 years?
To July 2024.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilmember McDuffie.
Thank you, Councilmember Silverman. Ms. Swartz, one final question about, I usually always have a question about certified business enterprise participation. I wanted to make sure I didn't leave before asking that. How does OLG ensure local CBE participation in sports wagering program? And what are some of the statutory and regulatory impediments to ensuring that participation?
We actually do, we monitor that and we report on that. We actually provide a report on that, but I will let Peter, I don't know if Peter, if you're on, he can speak more specifically to the details around that, but we do monitor the amount that each private operator provides or spends in CBE. We actually have had some good success in having CBE operators or CBE businesses be part of sports wagering. I think there was an example of one that is being utilized now across the nation that started in the district by one of the private operators. And the current spend for operators since the beginning is about 5.6 million in CBE spend. But they are required to report it. And that's all the class A and B.
Okay. And do you have the report broken down by each individual private operator?
Yes.
Okay, and can you provide that report to the committee? I'm sure you already
Yes,
have, but I
yes,
just
it's
want to make sure
been
we follow up.
sent,
Yeah.
but yeah, we can send it again for sure.
Peter, do you want to offer anything? I saw you come on as you have to, but.
No, I just, I think Director Suarez already mentioned that the amounts, we do have them broken down each quarter. The operators are required to send us a report of their CBE spend. And so we get it, DSLB gets it, and so we track it.
Are
So
you
we
or
can
any of
provide
the
that.
licensees seeing any statutory or regulatory impediments to ensuring CBE participation locally?
I think that's more under the purview of DSLBD. And so, I mean, we track the report in terms of getting the report and seeing how much they're spending. If there's any issues, I think DSLBD will sometimes raise them, and sometimes it has required them to adjust their CBE plan with them. But we don't really get too much in the, how they're spending it as much as we rely quite a bit on DSLBD.
Are they meeting their CBE goals? I know it's something that OLG usually prides itself in meeting certain goals. Are the Class A's and B singular, are they meeting their CBE goals?
From what we've been told by DSLBD, yes, they are.
Okay, and obviously there were some reports previously about the current contractor. What's the status of their CBE participation thus far?
On the you're talking with
Intralot.
Intralot.
Yep.
Oh, that one I'd have to maybe defer to one of my colleagues, either Ridgely Bennett or Craig Lindsay on that matter.
Okay.
In regards to Intralot right now, we've worked with DSLBD, and right now they are meeting their requirements. But, to be clear, they have till the end of the contract to meet them. But right now, DSLBD has not raised any issues with us.
How far are they into the contract? Just to remind
so
everybody.
it expires in July of 2024. So about 3 years in.
Okay. So it was how long was the contract?
5 years. Yeah, they can't be. I don't believe they can be more than 5.
Right. Even though it's at the end of the contract that they're required to meet it, usually you're tracking this stuff along the way. How are they tracking thus far?
Yeah, right now, as far as we can tell, they're meeting their guidelines, and we follow up, and I keep in contact with DSLBD pretty regularly just to make sure that continues.
Okay. And do you have any concerns with how that's going thus far?
And not right now.
Okay. All right. And please reach out to the committee if you encounter any concerns, either with the current contractor, Intralot, or with any of the private operators who currently hold Class A or B licenses.
Will do.
Okay. All right. I want to thank you. I want to thank all the public witnesses who took time out of their busy days to provide testimony here today. I want to thank you and your staff for responding to our request to be here and testify before we enter our recess and going through the long summer period. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the record before we close out?
No, I mean, again, we're open to any questions that you all have, any information you need. We think that the system is working well, and so thank you for the testimony.
Okay. And I'll note there were some folks who could not appear in person who did provide us with written testimony. So we appreciate your testimony by some of the other people who reached out. Rosso Grant is somebody who comes to mind. I think the American Gaming Association provided information. Sports Betting Alliance provided written testimony as well. This marks the end of today's Public Roundtable. I want to thank my colleagues who participated in today's Public Roundtable for their input, their questions. Members of the public who want to participate but were not able to participate today have until 5 p.m. on Friday, July 15th, 2022 to submit statements for the record on this matter. The time is now 2:43 p.m. and this roundtable is adjourned. Thank you to my staff and team. Thank you.